Imagine a world where Mario never made it big, but instead, a pink-haired wild child named Tomba became gaming's biggest icon. Sounds crazy, right? But back in 1997, that could have been reality. Tomba had everything: innovative gameplay, a unique art style, and a quirky charm that was hard to resist. So what went wrong? We'll look at what made this game special, why it didn't catch on, and how gaming might be different if it had. Get ready for a journey through gaming history that will make you question everything you thought you knew about 90s platformers. Alright, let's rewind the clock to 1997. PlayStation was taking over the gaming world, and in the midst of all the 3D madness, a little gem called Tomba popped up. Now, you might be thinking, another platformer, big deal. But hold on, because Tomba wasn't your average run and jump hero. This kid was different, like really different. Picture this, a feral child with hot pink hair and teeth that would make a dentist cry. And get this, he's running around in green pants chasing evil pigs. Yeah, you heard that right, evil pigs. While Mario was rescuing princesses and Sonic was collecting rings, Tomba was out there living his best wild child life. Here's where it gets interesting. Tomba's creators drew inspiration from Kijimuna, these mythological beings from Okinawa, Japan. These little guys were known for being mischievous and playful, with a strong connection to nature. It's like they took these ancient spirits and cranked the weird factor up to 11. Now, about that golden bracelet. It wasn't just some random bling. That bracelet was Tomba's prized possession, passed down from his grandfather. And those pesky coma pigs, they had the nerve to snatch it right from under his nose. But Tomba wasn't about to let some pork chops with attitude get away with his family heirloom. Nope, this pink-haired wild child was on a mission to save the whole dang land from the evil pig's curse. Here's something that might blow your mind. Tomba, for all his wild antics and pig-chasing shenanigans, didn't speak at all in the traditional sense. No witty one-liners or dramatic monologues for this guy. Tomba let his actions and expressions do the talking. It's like the developers said, let's make our main character more expressive than a mime on caffeine. But don't let the lack of dialogue fool you. Tomba had personality oozing out of every pink strand of hair. His quest wasn't just about retrieving a shiny bracelet or bopping evil pigs on the head. It was about restoring balance to a world gone crazy. And let's be real, who better to bring balance to a wacky world than a kid who looks like he lost a fight with a cotton candy machine? Picture this. You're playing a typical platformer when suddenly you're leaping between foreground and background like it's no big deal. That's Tomba for you, a game that decided to flip the script on 90s gaming conventions. While everyone else was going full 3D, Tomba stuck to its 2.5D guns, and boy, did it pay off. This wasn't your average hop and bop affair. Tomba threw RPG elements into the mix like it was making a gaming cocktail. You could level up abilities, gain experience, and even rock a flame shield or double jump. It was like Mario met Final Fantasy and they decided to have a wild party. Remember how most platformers back then were all about going right and jumping? Not Tomba. This game packed in over 130 side quests. Yeah, you heard that right. 130. You could be swinging around on vines one minute, then helping a villager find their lost pet the next. It made the whole world feel alive and interactive. Tomba's director, Takuro Fujiwara, wanted to give players more freedom than your typical platformer. The game had this non-linear event system that was pretty mind-blowing for its time. You could tackle objectives in different ways, exploring every nook and cranny of its wacky world. And get this, Tomba was basically a Metroidvania before that was even a thing. You'd be exploring, backtracking, finding new abilities, and using them to access areas you couldn't reach before. It was like the game was 10 steps ahead of everyone else, living in 2007 while the rest of us were stuck in 1997. The combat wasn't your typical jump on heads deal either. Sure, you could do that, but Tomba also let you swing around this cool weapon called Blackjack. It was like having a Swiss army knife in a world full of hammers, adding a layer of strategy to the gameplay that was pretty rare for platformers back then. In a time when games were becoming more linear, Tomba dared to be different. It combined platforming, RPG elements, and open-world exploration in a way that was years ahead of its time. It's no wonder this pink-haired wild child left such a lasting impression on players. Let's talk about Tomba's soundtrack, starting with the iconic Paradise theme. Remember that upbeat, catchy tune that greeted you in the US version? It set the tone for the whole wild ride. Now, Tomba's music wasn't your typical platform affair. Composed by Harumi Fujita, with help from Nao Hatsutani, this soundtrack was like a roller coaster for your ears, and boy did it divide opinions. As one reviewer put it, Tomba's music is either a work of genius or an assault on the senses. There's no in between. The soundtrack was this weird mix of upbeat melodies and quirky sound effects. It wasn't trying to be the next big thing in video game music. Instead, it was doing its own thing, marching to the beat of its own drum, literally. Some players loved how the music complemented specific game moments. Remember that eerie, minimalist tune in the Haunted Mansion? It perfectly captured the spooky vibe. Or how about the upbeat tropical rhythms in the jungle area? They really made you feel like you were on a wacky adventure. But here's where it gets even weirder. The main theme wasn't even the same for everyone. If you played the US version, you got that instrumental Paradise by Tokyo Q Channel. But if you were rocking the PAL version, you were jamming to No Sweat by North and South. Two completely different vibes for the same game. Despite all the criticism, Tomba's soundtrack did something right. It created this unique atmosphere that perfectly matched the game's wacky world. You've got these memorable tracks that really drive home the whimsical, adventurous tone of the game. In the end, Tomba's music is one of those things that contributes to its cult classic status. It's not universally loved, but it's universally remembered. And in the world of video games, sometimes being memorable is more important than being traditionally good. So whether you loved it or hated it, you've got to admit, Tomba's soundtrack was anything but forgettable. Even if you couldn't decide if you liked it or not, that soundtrack had a way of sticking with you. It's like that weird song you hear once and can't get out of your head for days. Tomba's music became this nostalgic element that players couldn't shake off, even years later. 5. The cult classic that could have been more. Now you might be wondering why Tomba isn't as famous as Crash Bandicoot or Spyro. I mean, it had all the ingredients for success, right? A unique character, fun gameplay, and that unforgettable music we just talked about. So what went wrong? Let me tell you, it's a bit of a wild ride. Here's the thing. Tomba was swimming against the tide. Back in the late 90s, everyone was going gaga over 3D graphics. It was the hot new thing, and games like Final Fantasy VII were blowing people's minds with their cutting-edge visuals. But Tomba, it was sticking to its guns with a 2.5D style. Don't get me wrong, it looked great, but it wasn't exactly following the trendy crowd. And let's be real for a second, a pink-haired kid fighting evil pigs, that's not exactly what you'd call mainstream material. It's quirky, it's fun, but it's also pretty out there. Some folks probably looked at the box art and thought, what in the world is this? It's the kind of game that makes you do a double take, which is cool for us now, but back then, not so much. So Tomba didn't exactly fly off the shelves. Despite getting some love from the critics for its cool controls and that non-linear event system, which was pretty ahead of its time by the way, it just didn't click with the masses. The sales numbers were, well, let's just say they weren't setting any records. But here's where it gets interesting. Tomba had a secret weapon, charm, loads of it. It's like that weird kid in school who everyone eventually realizes is actually super cool. Tomba might not have been the popular kid right away, but it had something special that stuck with the people who gave it a chance. Over time, word started to spread. Gamers who stumbled upon Tomba started talking about it. Hey, have you played this weird game with the pink-haired kid? It's actually pretty awesome. It was like a slow-burning fire, gradually building up a fan base through good old-fashioned word of mouth. And you know what? That's how cult classics are born. Tomba found its audience over time, through dedicated fans and nostalgic gamers who couldn't forget their wild adventures with that feral child and his pig-chasing antics. Now, here's a fun fact for you. Tomba has become such a collector's item that physical copies can sell for hundreds of dollars. That's right, the game that didn't make a big splash at launch is now a prized possession for gaming enthusiasts. Talk about a comeback story. But let's not get too carried away. Tomba's journey to cult classic status wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. One of the big hurdles it faced was marketing. While games like Final Fantasy VII were throwing around marketing budgets of around $40 million, Tomba was working with pocket change in comparison. It's hard to get noticed when you're whispering in a room full of people with megaphones. This pink-haired hero's influence is still going strong, inspiring modern indie games with its unique blend of platforming and adventure. The announcement has old-school gamers buzzing, ready to dive back into the world of evil pigs and stolen bracelets. What's your favourite Tomba memory? Share it in the comments and let's get hyped for this wild ride together.